Welcome to Fairy World. The river that flows backward. There was a village called Willow Bend that sat beside a wide river. The river was calm and green, and it flowed from north to south like all normal rivers do. The people of Willow Bend were fishermen and farmers. They lived simple lives. They woke with the sun and slept when the moon rose high. In this village lived a young woman named Mira. She was 20 years old and worked as a fisherwoman. Every morning Mira would take her small wooden boat out onto the river. She would cast her nets and pull in fish to sell at the market. Her hands were strong from years of working with ropes and nets. Her arms were tanned from the sun. She had dark hair that she tied back with a simple cord, and her eyes were the color of river stones. Mira lived in a small house at the edge of the village with her grandmother. Her grandmother's name was Elda. Elda was very old now. Her hair was white like fresh snow, and her hands shook when she tried to hold things. But there was something worse than her shaking hands. Elda was forgetting things. At first, it was small things. Elda would forget where she put her knitting needles. She would forget what she ate for breakfast. Mira would remind her gently, and Elda would smile and thank her. But then the forgetting grew worse. Elda began to forget the names of her neighbors. She forgot how to make the bread she had baked every week for 50 years. She would wake up confused, not knowing where she was. Sometimes she would look at Mira with empty eyes and ask who she was. This broke Mira's heart, but Mira was strong. She would hold her grandmother's hand and tell her stories until the confusion passed. She would remind Elda of happy times. She would sing old songs that Elda used to sing to her when she was a child. The strange thing was that Elda was not the only one forgetting. All around the village, other people were losing their memories too. Old Master Finn, who ran the bakery, forgot how to make his famous honey cakes. The blacksmith's wife forgot the names of her own children. The village elder forgot the stories of how Willow Bend was founded. It spread like a fog rolling in from the river. Week by week, more people forgot more things. The village began to feel different. People walked around looking lost. The market became quiet because no one could remember the old songs they used to sing while working. Children forgot the games their parents taught them. Mira watched all of this with growing worry. She tried to help everyone she could. She wrote things down for people so they could remember. She repeated names and facts over and over, but nothing seemed to stop the forgetting. One evening, Mira sat by the river after her day of fishing. The sun was setting, painting the water orange and pink. She felt tired and sad. She didn't know how to help her grandmother or her village. She looked out at the water and spoke quietly to herself. "I wish I knew what was causing this." She said, "I wish I could fix it." The river flowed on, steady and calm. Birds called from the willow trees. The air smelled like water and growing things. Mira sat there until the sun disappeared completely and the stars came out. She was about to go home when she noticed something strange. There was an old man sitting on a rock nearby. She was sure he hadn't been there a moment ago. He had a long white beard and wore simple gray clothes. He was watching the river just like she was. "Hello," Mira said carefully. "I didn't see you there." The old man turned to look at her. His eyes were very bright, like they held their own light. "You asked for help," he said. His voice was soft. but clear. "I was just talking to myself," Mira said. "The river heard you," the old man said, "and the river remembers everything." Mira looked at the water. It flowed south as it always did. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Your village is losing its memories because the songs have been forgotten," the old man said. "Long ago, there were melodies that held the memories of the world. They were kept safe at the source of all rivers, but the silent keeper locked them away, and now the world is forgetting." Mira didn't understand. "What songs? Who is the silent keeper?" The old man pointed at the river. "At midnight, this river flows backward. It will carry you upstream to the source of all forgotten songs. There you will find the silent keeper. You must convince them to release the melodies. Only then can your village's memories be healed." "Why me?" Mira asked. "Because you asked," the old man said simply, "and because you still remember how to care." Mira wanted to ask more questions, but when she blinked, the old man was gone. She looked all around, but he had vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. The night was quiet except for the sound of the river. Mira sat very still. She wondered if she had imagined the old man. Maybe she was so tired that she was seeing things, but his words stayed in her mind. The river flows backward at midnight, the source of all forgotten songs. The silent keeper. She looked at the sky. The moon was rising full and bright. She didn't have a clock, but she knew it was getting late. She thought about going home to check on Elda, but something made her stay by the river. If there was even a small chance that she could help her grandmother and her village, she had to try. Mira went to where her boat was tied to the dock. It was a simple boat, just big enough for her and her fishing nets. She climbed in and sat down. She decided she would wait and see if what the old man said was true. The night grew darker. The village behind her became quiet as people went to sleep. The moon moved slowly across the sky. Mira waited in her boat, rocking gently on the water. She watched the river carefully. It flowed south, just as it always did. The current moved steadily. She began to think that the old man had been a dream or a trick of her tired mind. But then the air changed. It grew cooler. The night seemed to hold its breath, and right as the moon reached the very top of the sky, something incredible happened. The river stopped flowing. For just a moment, the water was completely still. It was like time itself had paused. Mira could see her reflection perfectly in the smooth surface. Then, slowly, the water began to move again. But this time, it flowed north. It flowed backward. Mira gasped. The current had reversed. The river was flowing upstream against all natural laws. She grabbed the sides of her boat as it began to move. She didn't have to paddle or row. The backward current caught her boat and started carrying her north, away from Willow Bend. At first, Mira was frightened. The river was moving faster than it ever did during the day. Her boat rushed along, guided by the strange current. The banks on either side became dark blurs. The trees seemed to lean in to watch her pass. But then Mira's fear turned to wonder. The night was beautiful. The moon shone so brightly that she could see everything clearly. The stars reflected on the water like thousands of tiny lights. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow, like it had never been breathed before. The river carried her on and on. She passed places she had never seen before. She passed forests where the trees grew so tall they seemed to touch the sky. She passed meadows where flowers glowed softly in the moonlight. She passed rocks that jutted from the water like ancient monuments. Time felt strange. Mira didn't know if she had been traveling for minutes or hours. The backward flowing river seemed to exist outside of normal time. She wasn't hungry or thirsty. She wasn't tired. She simply floated along, watching the world slide by. Then she began to hear something. At first, it was so faint that she thought she was imagining it. But it grew stronger. It was music. Not quite music. It was more like the memory of music. She could almost hear melodies, but they were distant and unclear, like trying to remember a song from childhood. The sound made her heart ache. It was beautiful and sad at the same time. It reminded her of things she had forgotten. It reminded her of her mother, who had died when Mira was young. It reminded her of her father, who had gone to sea and never returned. It reminded her of Elda's voice when it was still strong and sure. Mira realized she was crying. Tears ran down her face, but they weren't only sad tears. They were tears that came from feeling something deep and true. The river carried her on. The almost music grew stronger, and then, ahead of her, she saw something that made her catch her breath. The river was leading into a mountain, not through a cave or tunnel, but into the mountain itself. The stone face of the mountain seemed to open like a door. Water flowed into the opening, and Mira's boat flowed with it. She should have been afraid. She should have jumped out of the boat and tried to swim back. But she didn't. She felt drawn forward. The almost music was calling to her. Her boat slipped through the opening. The stone walls rose up on either side of her, but it wasn't dark. The stone itself seemed to glow with a soft blue light. The river continued backward, upward, defying everything Mira knew about how water should behave. The passage wound through the mountain. Sometimes it was wide, and sometimes it was narrow. The walls were smooth and carved with patterns that might have been writing or might have been decoration. Mira couldn't tell. The almost music echoed off the stone surrounding her. Then the passage opened up. Mira found herself floating into a vast cavern inside the mountain. It was so large that she couldn't see the top of it. The walls sparkled with crystals that gave off gentle light. The river spread out into a wide pool, still flowing backward, all toward the center of the cavern. And there, in the very center, was the source. The river came from a spring that flowed up from the ground. The water rose in a column, defying gravity, and then spread out in all directions, creating all the rivers of the world. It was impossible, and yet Mira was seeing it with her own eyes. The almost music was very strong here. It came from the spring itself. Mira could see something in the water. There were lights, or maybe they were shapes, or maybe they were something else entirely. They swirled in the rising water, trying to break free, but something was holding them back. Mira's boat reached the edge of the pool. She stepped out onto a smooth stone shore. The ground was dry despite being so close to the water. She stood there, staring at the impossible spring, and then she noticed that she was not alone. On the far side of the spring sat a figure. At first, Mira thought it was a statue. It was completely still and completely silent. But as she walked closer, she realized it was alive. It was a person, or something like a person, sitting cross-legged on the stone. They were draped in robes that seemed to be made of mist and shadow. Their face was hidden by a hood. "Hello!" Mira called out. Her voice echoed in the huge cavern. The figure didn't move. Mira walked around the pool toward the figure. As she got closer, she could feel something radiating from them. It was silence, not just the absence of sound, but silence as a force, as a presence. It pressed against her like a weight. "Are you the silent keeper?" Mira asked. The figure raised their head slightly. Mira still couldn't see their face, but she felt them looking at her. "I came to ask for your help," Mira said. "My village is forgetting everything. An old man told me that you locked away the songs that hold memories. He said, 'I need to convince you to release them.'" The silent keeper didn't respond. They simply sat there, radiating that heavy silence. Mira didn't know what to do. She had expected to have a conversation. She had thought she would be able to explain and persuade. But how could she convince someone who wouldn't speak? She stood there for a long moment, thinking. The almost music swirled around her. She looked at the spring and at the lights trapped in the water. They wanted to be free. She could feel it. "Why did you lock them away?" Mira asked. Silence. "Please," Mira said. "My grandmother is forgetting who I am. She's forgetting her whole life. Everyone in my village is losing their memories. If the songs can help, please let them go." More silence. Mira felt frustration building in her chest. She had come all this way. She had trusted the strange old man. She had ridden the backward river to this impossible place. And now this silent keeper wouldn't even talk to her. "Why won't you answer me?" she said, her voice rising. The silent keeper remained still. Mira took a deep breath. She was getting angry, but anger wouldn't help. She needed to think. She looked around the cavern. She looked at the spring. She listened to the almost music. And then she understood something. The silent keeper wasn't refusing to speak. They were protecting the silence itself. And there was a reason for that. Mira sat down on the stone floor. She sat facing the silent keeper. She closed her eyes and she let herself be quiet. At first it was hard. Her mind was full of worries and questions and frustration. But slowly she let all of that settle. She breathed in and out. She felt the stone beneath her. She felt the cool air. She listened to the almost music without trying to grab onto it. And in that quietness, she began to understand. The songs weren't just melodies. They were memories, yes, but they were more than that. They were every sound that had ever been made, every word ever spoken, every laugh and cry and shout. They were overwhelming. They were infinite. If they were all released at once, they would drown out everything. No one would be able to hear anything over the noise of all the sounds that had ever been. The silent keeper had locked them away to protect the world from that chaos. But in doing so, they had created a different problem. Without the songs, without the melodies that carried memories, people began to forget. The world became too quiet, too empty. Mira opened her eyes. She looked at the silent keeper with new understanding. "You're trying to protect us," she said softly. "You locked away the songs because they were too much, too loud, too overwhelming." The silent keeper's head tilted slightly. It was the first movement they had made. "But we need them," Mira continued. "Not all of them all at once, but we need some of them. We need enough to remember. There has to be a balance between the silence and the songs." The silent keeper remained still, but Mira felt like they were listening now. "I'm a fisherwoman," Mira said. "I work on the river every day, and I know about balance. If a net is too tight, it catches nothing because the water can't flow through. If it's too loose, all the fish escape. You need the right balance. Enough space for water to flow, but enough structure to catch what you need. She gestured to the spring. Right now, you're holding everything too tight. The songs can't flow at all, but I'm not asking you to open everything. I'm asking for balance. The cavern was very quiet. Even the almost music seemed to be waiting. Then, slowly, the silent keeper stood up. They were tall, much taller than Mira had expected. They moved with grace, like mist flowing over water. They walked to the edge of the spring and looked down into it. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the silent keeper reached out one hand. Their fingers were long and pale. They touched the surface of the rising water, and they began to sing. The silent keeper's voice was unlike anything Mira had ever heard. It wasn't loud, but it filled the entire cavern. It wasn't exactly a song, but it was pure melody. It was sad and joyful and ancient all at once. As the silent keeper sang, the lights in the water began to respond. They rose up, following the melody. They were songs themselves, Mira realized. Each light was a melody, a memory, a moment of sound that had been preserved in the water. The silent keeper's song was calling them, but carefully, selectively. They weren't releasing all the songs, they were choosing. Their melody asked questions of each light, and some lights rose while others sank back down. It was the most beautiful thing Mira had ever witnessed. She stood there with tears streaming down her face, watching the silent keeper weave their careful magic. The selected songs gathered in the air above the spring. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They swirled together like a flock of glowing birds. Each one hummed with its own melody, but somehow they harmonized together. Then the silent keeper turned to Mira. She still couldn't see their face under the hood, but she felt their gaze. The silent keeper gestured to the swirling songs and then pointed at Mira. Mira understood. These songs were for her to take back. These melodies would heal her village. But how could she carry them? She had no bag or box. She had nothing but her fishing clothes and her empty hands. The silent keeper seemed to understand her confusion. They sang another note, this one directed at Mira. Mira felt the note enter her chest. It vibrated in her ribs, in her heart, in her bones, and suddenly she understood. She didn't need to carry the songs. She needed to become their vessel. She needed to learn them so deeply that they became part of her. Mira nodded. "I'm ready," she said. The silent keeper raised their arms. The swirling songs began to flow toward Mira. The first melody touched her, and suddenly she was remembering. She remembered her mother's face, not just the image of it, but the feeling of it, the way her mother smiled, the sound of her mother's laugh, the smell of bread baking that always clung to her mother's clothes. All of it came flooding back with crystal clarity. The second melody came, and she remembered her father, his strong hands, his terrible singing voice, the stories he told about the sea, the way he would swing her up onto his shoulders when she was small. The third melody brought back a summer when she was 10 years old, running through fields with other children, the taste of wild strawberries, the feeling of grass under bare feet, the pure joy of being young and free. On and on the melodies came. Each one carried memories, but not just Mira's memories. They carried the memories of her village. She remembered things she had never experienced herself. She remembered the founding of Willow Bend. She remembered storms and celebrations. She remembered weddings and funerals. She remembered the lives of people who had died long before she was born. The songs filled her up. She felt like she would burst. Her mind couldn't hold all of this, but somehow it did. The melodies organized themselves inside her. They nested together like her grandmother's mixing bowls, each one fitting into the next. Finally, the last melody entered her. It was quiet and gentle. It was a lullaby that mothers had sung in Willow Bend for generations. Elda had sung it to Mira's mother. Mira's mother had sung it to Mira. And now it lived in Mira again, ready to be passed on. Mira opened her eyes. She hadn't realized she had closed them. She felt different. She felt full in a way she never had before. The melodies hummed inside her, content to wait until they were needed. The silent keeper stood before her. They reached up and slowly lowered their hood. Underneath was a face that was neither young nor old, neither male nor female. It was a face that seemed to contain all possibilities. But what struck Mira most were the eyes. They were sad and kind and infinitely patient. The silent keeper smiled at her. It was a small smile, but it transformed their whole face. Then they spoke. Their voice was soft and clear, and it made Mira's heart ache to hear it. "Thank you," the silent keeper said. "For what?" Mira asked. "For understanding," they said. "I have kept the songs locked away for so long. I forgot that there could be another way. You reminded me of balance." "Will you release more songs?" Mira asked. "For other people and other places?" The silent keeper nodded slowly. "Carefully," they said. "When the right people come, when they ask with true need, I will no longer hold them all locked away, but I will still guard them. There must always be someone to maintain the balance between silence and song." "That sounds lonely," Mira said. The silent keeper smiled again. "It is what I am," they said. "But it is less lonely now that someone has understood." Mira wanted to say more, but she felt a pull. The songs inside her were tugging at her. They wanted to return home. They needed to be released into the world. "I have to go back," Mira said. "Yes," the silent keeper agreed. "The river will carry you. But remember, the songs you carry are not just for healing. They are for teaching. When the memories are restored, help your people understand the importance of both song and silence. Too much of either creates imbalance." Mira nodded. "I'll remember." The silent keeper pointed to the pool. Mira's boat was waiting at the edge, rocking gently. She walked to it and climbed in. "Thank you," Mira said, looking back at the silent keeper. They raised one hand in farewell, and then they sat back down in their cross-legged position beside the spring. The hood didn't go back up, though. They kept their face uncovered. It seemed like a small change, but Mira thought it was significant. The current caught her boat. The backward river began to carry her away from the spring. She looked back at the cavern, at the impossible source of all rivers, at the silent keeper keeping their eternal watch. Then the passage swallowed her up, and they were gone from sight. The journey back was different from the journey there. Mira felt the weight of the songs inside her. They wanted to be sung. They wanted to be shared. They hummed in her chest and throat, eager to emerge, but she held them in. Not yet. Not until she was home. The boat moved through the stone passage. The glowing walls slipped by. Then she emerged from the mountain and was back on the open river. The night was still dark, but there was a hint of dawn on the horizon. The backward river carried her south toward home. Everything she had passed on the way up, she passed again on the way back. The glowing meadows, the tall forests, the ancient rocks. And then, as the sky began to lighten, she saw Willow Bend ahead. The river delivered her right to the dock where she had started. As her boat touched the wood, the current returned to normal. The water flowed south again, as it always had during the day. Mira climbed out of her boat on shaky legs. She had been sitting for so long. The sun was just beginning to rise. The village was waking up. She could hear roosters crowing and doors opening. She needed to get home to Elda. But as she walked through the village, people began to emerge from their houses. They looked lost and confused, just as they had been the day before. The forgetting was still affecting them. Mira reached her house. She opened the door quietly. Elda was sitting at the table, looking bewildered. She looked up when Mira entered. "Who are you?" Elda asked. Mira's heart clenched. But she had the songs now. She had the cure. She sat down beside her grandmother. She took Elda's shaking hand in hers, and then she began to sing. The first melody rose from her throat. It was the lullaby, the one Elda had sung when she was young. Mira sang it perfectly, with all the little ornaments and variations that Elda had always used. Elda's eyes widened. "I know that song," she whispered. Mira kept singing. She moved from the lullaby to another melody, this one a song about the river. It was a song the fishermen used to sing. Mira sang it with a strong, clear voice. Elda's eyes filled with tears. "I remember," she said. "I remember teaching you that song." Mira sang more. Song after song poured out of her. Each melody carried memories with it. She could see them returning to Elda. Her grandmother's face changed. The confusion lifted. The emptiness in her eyes filled with recognition and life. "Mira," Elda said, and this time she really knew her. "My sweet Mira, where did you learn all these songs?" "I'll tell you later," Mira said. "But first, I need to help everyone else." She stood up and went to the door. She opened it and stepped outside. The sun was fully up now. People were moving through the village, going about their day in the confused, mechanical way they had been doing things. Mira climbed up onto the edge of the village well so everyone could see her. She took a deep breath and she began to sing. Her voice carried across the village. It was stronger than it had ever been. The melodies flowed from her one after another. They spread through the air like ripples on water. People stopped what they were doing. They turned to listen, and as they listened, they remembered. Mira sang for hours. She sang every melody the Silent Keeper had given her. She sang the founding songs and the harvest songs and the morning songs and the celebration songs. She sang lullabies and work songs and love songs and sailing songs. As she sang, the village came back to life. Master Finn remembered how to make his honey cakes. The blacksmith's wife remembered her children's names. The village elder remembered the old stories. Children remembered their games. Everyone remembered themselves. By the time the sun reached its peak in the sky, Mira had sung every song. Her throat was tired, but it was a good tired. She looked around at her village. People were crying and laughing and hugging each other. They were whole again. Elda came and stood beside the well. She looked up at Mira with pride and wonder. "Come down from there," Elda said. "You must be exhausted." Mira climbed down. Her legs were shaky. Elda wrapped an arm around her and led her home. Other villagers called out thanks as they passed. Mira waved to them but didn't have the energy to say much. At home, Elda made Mira sit down. She brought her water and bread and cheese. Mira ate and drank. She hadn't realized how hungry she was. "Now," Elda said, sitting across from her, "tell me where you went and how you brought back our memories." So Mira told her. She told her about the old man by the river. She told her about waiting for midnight and the river flowing backward. She told her about the journey to the source, about the cavern and the spring and the silent keeper. She told her about understanding the need for balance and about receiving the songs. Elda listened to all of it with wide eyes. When Mira finished, Elda was quiet for a long moment. "That's quite a story," Elda finally said, "but I believe you. I can feel the truth of it in the songs you sang. They weren't just melodies. They carried real memory." "The silent keeper said I need to teach people," Mira said. "I need to help them understand the importance of both song and silence. We need balance." Elda nodded thoughtfully. "Then that's what you'll do, but not today. Today you need to rest." Mira didn't argue. She was more tired than she had ever been. Elda helped her to her bed, and Mira lay down. She was asleep within moments. She slept deeply and didn't dream. When she woke, it was late afternoon. The house was quiet. She got up and found Elda knitting in her chair. The old woman's hands were steady. She was making a complicated pattern without even looking at her work. She had remembered how. "Better?" Elda asked. "Yes," Mira said. She stretched and felt her muscles complain. "What happened while I slept?" "The whole village has been talking," Elda said, "about you and the songs and their memories coming back. Everyone wants to thank you, but I told them you were resting and to wait." "Thank you," Mira said. She went to the door and looked out. The village looked different now, or maybe it was the same as it always had been. But people were moving with purpose. They were talking and laughing. They were alive in a way they hadn't been for weeks. Over the next several days, life in Willowbend returned to normal. But it was a better normal than before. People had faced the loss of their memories, and now that those memories were returned, they valued them more. Mira became a teacher as well as a fisherwoman. In the evenings, people would gather, and she would teach them the songs. She taught them the melodies and explained the memories each one carried. She taught them to value both the songs and the quiet between the songs. She also taught them to be careful. Too much noise, too much chatter, too much sound could be overwhelming. The village needed times of song and times of silence. They needed balance. People learned. They taught the songs to their children. They sang while they worked and while they celebrated. But they also practiced being quiet. They took time each day to simply sit in silence, to rest their minds, to listen to the world without adding to its noise. Mira continued to fish. She went out on the river every morning just as she always had. But now she would sometimes sing to herself as she worked, and the songs would carry across the water. She never saw the old man again. She never saw the river flow backward again either. She stayed up at midnight many times, watching the water, but it always flowed south as normal rivers do. She wondered if she had imagined it all, but then she would remember the weight of the songs entering her. She would remember the silent keeper's sad, kind eyes. She would remember the impossible, spring flowing upward, and she knew it had been real. Sometimes on very quiet nights, she thought she could hear the faintest echo of the almost music. It was the sound of all the songs still locked away at the source of the river, waiting for the right time and the right people to release them. Elda lived for many more years. Her memory stayed strong until the very end. On the day she died, she was old and content. She held Mira's hand and smiled. "Sing me the lullaby," she said. Mira sang it. Her voice was steady even though tears ran down her face. Elda closed her eyes, still smiling, and slipped away peacefully. Mira buried her grandmother beside the river under a willow tree. She sang all the proper mourning songs. The whole village came to pay their respects. They all remembered Elda now. They remembered her strength and her kindness and her long life. After the funeral, Mira stood by the grave for a long time. The sun set, the stars came out, and she sang a new song, one that came from her own heart. It was a song of gratitude for the years she had with her grandmother. It was a song of grief for the loss. It was a song of hope that Elda was at peace. As she sang, she felt something respond. It was very faint, but it was there. The almost music from far away, from the source of the river, was singing with her. The silent keeper was listening, and Mira knew that Elda's melody, the song of her life and memory, had been added to the great collection at the heart of the world. Mira kept living. She kept fishing and singing and teaching. She never married. She never had children of her own, but the whole village became her family. She taught the songs to everyone who would listen. She helped them remember. She helped them find balance. As she grew older, her voice remained strong. She could still sing all the melodies the silent keeper had given her. They never faded from her memory. They were part of her now, woven into her very being. Other young people sometimes came to her and asked about her journey. They wanted to know how to find the backward river. They wanted to meet the silent keeper themselves. Mira would tell them her story, but she would also explain that the journey was different for everyone. The river flowed backward for her because it was what she needed. Others might find different paths to the same source, or they might need to find different sources entirely. The important thing, she would say, is to ask the right questions, to truly need the answers, and to be ready to learn and change. Some people understood, some didn't. Mira taught those who understood. She helped them develop the balance of song and silence in their own lives. Years passed. Mira's hair turned gray, then white. Her hands became weathered and strong from decades of fishing. She moved a little slower, but her mind stayed sharp. Her memory never faltered. The songs kept her memories safe. One evening, when Mira was very old, she sat by the river at sunset, just as she had done so many times before. The water was calm and green. It flowed south. Birds called from the willow trees. She thought about her life. She had done what she set out to do. She had saved her village's memories. She had taught the importance of balance. She had lived a good life. She didn't regret not having children of her own. The songs were her children. She had given them to the village, and they would outlive her. They would be passed down through generations. The memories would continue. As the sun touched the horizon, Mira began to sing. She sang softly, just for herself. She sang the lullaby that started everything. She sang it exactly as Elda had taught her all those years ago. And as she sang, she noticed something. There was an old man sitting on a rock nearby. He had a long white beard and wore simple gray clothes. His eyes were very bright. Mira stopped singing. She looked at him and smiled. "Hello again," she said. "Hello, Mira," the old man said. "You did well." "Thank you for sending me on that journey," Mira said. "It changed everything." "You changed everything," the old man corrected. "I only told you the river would flow backward. You chose to wait. You chose to go. You chose to understand." "Is it time?" Mira asked. She didn't know why she asked that question, but it felt right. The old man nodded gently. "Soon, but not quite yet. You still have a little time." "Good," Mira said. "I want to see one more sunrise." The old man smiled. "Then you will." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared and the stars came out. After a while, the old man stood up. "I'll see you again," he said. "I know," Mira replied. He walked away into the darkness and was gone. Mira sat by the river all night. She watched the moon rise and cross the sky. She listened to the water flowing. She hummed the melodies that lived inside her. She remembered everything. As dawn approached, she saw the sky begin to lighten. She watched the darkness turn to gray, then to pink, then to gold. The sun rose slowly, painting the world with new light. It was the most beautiful sunrise Mira had ever seen, or maybe they were all equally beautiful, and she was finally seeing it clearly. When the sun was fully up, Mira stood. Her old bones creaked, but she didn't mind. She walked slowly back to the village. People were waking up. Smoke rose from chimneys. She could hear morning sounds. She went to the village square. A few early risers were there, drawing water from the well, preparing for the day. They greeted her warmly. "Mira," said a young woman named Tara, "you're up early." "I watched the sunrise," Mira said. "Was it beautiful?" asked Tara. "Yes," Mira said. "Very beautiful." She looked around at the village, at the people, at the river flowing past. She felt content. She felt complete. "Tara," Mira said, "would you help me gather everyone? I want to teach one last song." "Of course," Tara said, looking concerned. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Mira assured her. "Better than fine, but I want to share something while I can." Tara went to spread the word. Within an hour, the whole village had gathered in the square. Everyone came, from the oldest to the youngest. They all loved Mira. She had saved their memories. She had taught them to sing. She had been their guardian and teacher for so many years. Mira stood in the center of the crowd. She looked around at all the faces. She knew every one of them. She had sung to all of them. She had taught them all. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was still strong. "I want to teach you a new song today, or not exactly new. It's a song I've carried for a long time, but I've never sung it aloud. It's been waiting for the right moment." "What song is it?" someone asked. "It's the song of the silent keeper," Mira said. "It's the melody I heard when they released the songs that healed you. I've kept it inside all these years because I didn't understand it fully, but now I do." She took a deep breath, and she sang. The melody was unlike any of the others she had taught. It was complex and simple at the same time. It held both sound and silence. It was both joyful and sorrowful. It was the song of balance itself. As Mira sang, everyone listened with complete attention. They felt the song enter them. They understood, perhaps for the first time, what Mira had been trying to teach them all these years. Song and silence weren't opposites. They were partners. They needed each other. One gave meaning to the other. The song ended. Mira stood in the silence that followed. Everyone was quiet, absorbing what they had heard and felt. Then, one by one, they began to hum. They picked up the melody and hummed it together. It sounded like the river. It sounded like the wind. It sounded like the world breathing. Mira smiled. They understood. The song would continue after she was gone. The balance would be maintained. She felt very tired suddenly. The young woman, Tara, noticed and hurried to her side. "Mira, you should sit down," Tara said. "Yes," Mira agreed. "I think I will." They helped her to a bench. She sat down gratefully. The village continued to hum the song. It was beautiful. Mira closed her eyes and listened. She felt herself drifting. It was peaceful. She wasn't afraid. She had done what she needed to do. She had lived fully. She had learned the importance of balance and had taught it to others. As she drifted,